After Stephen Batory's death at the end of 1586, the third interregnum began in the Republic. Alongside the traditional contenders for the throne from Habsburg and Rurikov dynasties, our Nordic neighbors, the Vazas from Sweden, appeared. Sigismund Vasa, the son of John III and Catherine the Jagiellonian, and the successor to the Swedish throne, became a desirable ruler for the Poles. The calculation was quite simple here, to form a union with the Swedes against Moscow and to incorporate northern Estonia, which was ruled by the Swedes, into our vassal Livonia. This time, the Poles held the election alone and elected two rulers, Maximilian von Habsburg and Sigismund Vasa. Catherine Jagiellonian's blood was a decisive factor, and on the 27th of December 1587, Sigismund received the Polish crown. Lithuania refused to recognize either contender. It declared that they would be recognized only after our requests had been met, to renew truce with Russia, to give Livonia back to Lithuania, and to approve the Third Statute of Lithuania. The latter request of ours seemed to be quite simple, however, not for the Polish nobility. In the statute, nothing was said about the union with Poland, and the Poles resented one particular article of the statute, which provided that land and posts in Lithuania could be granted exclusively to its inhabitants. The approval of such a statute would have meant Lithuania's return to the path of independence. Sigismund Vasa did concede, and truce was renewed, the statute was approved, and the rule of Livonia was granted to both states, Lithuania and Poland. At the end of January, we proclaimed him the Grand Duke of Lithuania. Brought up in the tradition of absolute monarchy, Sigismund made an attempt to consolidate royal power. In 1606, he proposed forming a regular army and a treasury independent of the parliament. The Polish nobility revolted. The king was obliged to wage war against his own nobility. In 1609, he beat them at Guzov, but had to give up state reforms. Our king, Sigismund Vasa, could never understand fully which country was his kingdom, Poland or Sweden. The freedoms of the nobility made him disappointed with the Polish throne, and already in 1589 he started talks with Habsburgs on the transfer of the Republic's throne. In Sweden, his motherland, he was an alien. Educated by his mother Catherine as an ardent and fierce Catholic, he had no way of pleasing or appealing to Protestant Sweden. This, in 1599, robbed him of the Swedish throne. There was a deficit of tolerance in the relations with the reformers and especially with the eastern lands of Lithuania and the Ukrainian Slavs. In 1596, the heads of Catholic and Orthodox churches formed the renowned Brest Union. They agreed that Orthodox believers of the Republic would recognize the Pope's authority and the most important dogmas of the Catholic Church, but they will stick to the rituals of Oriental Church and would use Church Slavonic. The major part of our Orthodox believers resented the idea and stayed loyal to the Orthodox Church. In this way, Krakow itself put a tool of stable tension into the hands of Moscow. From this moment on, Moscow would be trumpeting to the whole world about the restriction of the freedom of faith in the Republic. The time when Moscow and Ukrainian separatists would make use of it was no more a distant future. During the 45 years of his rule, Sigismund was at war with Sweden, Russia and Turkey. His desire to get the Swedish throne made him wage war back in 1600. Lithuanian commanders Kristupas Radvila Perkūnas beat the Swedes by Koknese in 1601 and Jonas Karolis Chodkevičius at Paide in 1604 and by Salaspils in 1605. In 1611 we agreed on a truce, but in 1617 the Swedes landed in Livonia again. During 3 campaigns prior to 1627, they invaded major part of Livonia, took Biržai, which belonged to the Radvila family, attacked in Prussia and in Polish Pomerania. In 1626, Leonas Sapiega, bypassing the ruler, agreed on a truce between Lithuania and Sweden, and according to the agreement of 1629, we lost a major part of Livonia. We retained only Latgala and the Kurish duchies. During Sigismund's reign, we were witnesses of an interesting adventure in Moscow. Russia, which was devastated by Ivan IV, still failed to regain its strength. In 1598, the feeble-minded Fyodor I died, and the new dynasty was not consolidated either by Boris Godunov, who died unexpectedly in 1605. It was not consolidated by his murdered son Fyodor II either, or by the overthrown Tsar Vasily Šuiskį. To a great extent, that confusion was caused by 2 Dimitris, the impostors. The first appeared already during the reign of Boris Godunov. He tried to persuade everybody that he was the miraculously saved son of Ivan IV. It's not clear whether our nobles, the Chancellor of Lithuania Leonas Sapiega and the Polish nobles Georg Mniszek and Wiśniowiecki believed him or simply pretended to believe. In 1604, they helped Dmitry to come to Moscow. The attitude of Russia, which was inclined to believe in miracles towards Dmitry, was favorable, but in 1606, wary of Polish constraints, Muscovites revolted and killed Dmitry. The second impostor appeared, but the Russian nobles proposed the throne to Sigismund's brother Vladislav. The ruler declined the proposal and prohibited the gentry of the Republic to interfere in Russian affairs. The situation changed when in 1609 the Russians concluded a military agreement with the Swedes. After that, our ruler laid a siege on Smolensk, beat the Russians by Klushino and in 1611 took Smolensk. Muscovites overthrew Tsar Vasily Šuiskį and proclaimed Vladislav Vasa the new Tsar. The liberation movement in Russia commenced, and by 1613 the army of the Republic was ousted from the country. The dynastic interests of Zigmanto Vazos involved the Republic in long-term wars with Sweden and Russia. Coveting the Swedish and later the Russian crown, he lost Livonia with the Baltic Sea ports. Led by Christian solidarity, he made Lithuanians fight even in faraway Turkey. Lithuania understood that Sigismund was motivated only by the dynastic and Polish affairs. He died in 1632 while being preoccupied with the transfer of the throne to his son Vladislav. 5 months after Sigismund's death, on the 15th of November, Vladislav was elected the ruler of the Republic. Vladislav Vasa took on the royal affairs with ardor. He won the war for Smolensk, which was renewed in the election autumn, but in return to the lands which went to the Republic, he renounced the title of the Tsar of Russia. He made an attempt to regain Livonia and the Swedish crown. Swedes and Poles won in the given campaign. In 1635, Swedes retained Livonia but withdrew from Prussia, and Vladislav was made to forsake the crown of Sweden for good. In Vladislav's lifetime, some of the problems which sprang up during the reign of his predecessors broke forth, such as unencumbered freedoms for the nobility, which you would call democracy of the nobles, and the separatist campaign, which was begun by the Ukrainian Cossacks and was later supported by Russia. There were some revolts in Ukraine in the 4th decade, which were suppressed only in 1638. The Cossacks who revolted in 1646 failed to settle down. Driven by the oppression of Polish colonists and religious coercion, they stirred up a massive insurrection of Cossacks and peasants led by Bogdan Khmelnytsky in 1648. Attempts by the ruler to play a more influential role in the political life of Europe failed. His marriages in 1637 to Cecilia Renat von Habsburg and in 1646 to French Princess Maria Louise Gonzaga failed to facilitate that either. Quite on the contrary, Habsburg and French courts started exercising greater influence on the internal life of the Republic. Vladislav Vasa's reign did not last long, 16 years, and on the 20th of May 1648 he died. The last Vasa, John Casimir, who was elected soon after his brother's death, terminated the line of endless failures of the Vasa dynasty in the Republic. He abdicated from the king's throne of his own free will. War with the Ukrainian rebels grew into war with Russia. As might have been expected, religious issues pushed Ukrainian Cossacks into the hands of Moscow Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich. The Pereyaslav Agreement was concluded between them in 1654, and in the same year the Russian army invaded the Republic. In August 1655, the enemy took the capital of Lithuania, Vilnius, for the first time in Lithuanian history. As if that were not enough, Swedes decided to become the ruler of the Baltic Sea and occupy all of its coasts. Already in June, the Swedish army invaded the Republic, the army of Polish conscripts surrendered without fight, and Warsaw fell. John Casimir fled abroad to Austria. Lithuanian nobility were confused. Part of them, led by field hetman Vincent Gosiewski, urged a surrender to the Russian Tsar, who on the 13th of September proclaimed himself the Grand Duke of Lithuania, Belarus, Volhynia and Podol in Vilnius. Another part, led by Grand Hetman Jonas Radvila, on the 20th of October in Kėdainiai declared the Lithuanian-Swedish Union. This act terminated the Lithuanian-Polish Union. John Casimir was removed, Karl X the Gustav was proclaimed the Grand Duke of Lithuania, and Lithuania became a Swedish vassal. at the end of 1655, an anti-Swedish guerrilla movement was launched. Jon Kazimier returned from exile. In April next year, a successful revolt against Swedes erupted in Lithuania, and in August we worked out the truce between the Republic and Russia in Nemėžis. In 1659, Cossacks switched over to the Russian side again. The war that resumed ended with the Andrusov Treaty. The Republic lost many eastern lands and the left bank of Ukraine with Kiev. Meanwhile, the article of the agreement related to the safeguarding of the rights of Orthodoxy in Lithuania and the rights of Catholics in Russia became a pretext for Russia to start interfering into the internal affairs of the Republic. Jon Kazimier, like his father Sigismund, made attempts to reform the state, to introduce stable taxes, abolish the liberum veto right, to elect the ruler's successor when the former was still alive. But all of these ventures failed. In 1668, Jon Kazimier went to live in France. It turned out that the nation of nobility enjoying a set of privileged rights it had was in no position to withstand the states ruled by absolute monarchies, Sweden, Russia, and emerging Prussia.